In October 2020, we made history at the South Moreton Boxing Club by staging the world's first behind-closed-doors white-collar boxing show. We got over 10,000 views on the night across 103 countries. Now we're bringing the live rumble back, bigger and better than before. Follow the fighters in the build-up and vote on the night for your favourites. See all the thrills, spills and skills from the best in white-collar boxing, live and free at the KO Cup.
Okay, Peter. So just wanted to do a bit of a reflection on obviously the massive story of the weekend. That the big fight on the Cinco de Mayo weekend of Billy Joe Saunders against Canelo Alvarez, and how that unfolded, and what the ending tells us, and where those two fighters are going now. I thought the build up to fight was really interesting. I did. There was the tussle over the ring and the ring size. Obviously, Billy Joe saying he wanted a bigger ring and he'd been promised a bigger ring and all this sort of thing, and eventually getting the bigger ring. And I just thought that was interesting and worthwhile commentating on, because when you go into these big fights against a Canelo Alvarez, as you used to against a Mayweather or against a Klitschko, it's not the deal where it's like, this is the purse split, this is whatever, the things we're hearing about the Joshua Fury fight, for example. It's very much they turn to you and say, this is what you'll get, this is when you'll turn up, and this is what you'll do. So they call all the shots. They've got this massive promotional powerhouse behind them. And then so for Billy Joe to come along and have a bit of a tussle and say, no, I'm not just the B-side, I want this, I want that, and otherwise I'm going home, was a little bit of a pullback at that. And interestingly enough, obviously, when he arrived in town, he did arrive seemingly full of confidence, and his cheerleader-in-chief, Tyson Fury, was there as well to give moral support, which really seemed to be working. And he was very much saying, I'm not here to make up the numbers, and this is about me. They were critical of Eddie Hearn, saying that, he was too in with Canelo and should be representing Billy Joe. But, the tussle over the ring was very much like when Fury fought Klitschko the first time. Again, was expected to be paid his amount, come along, do his bit. But there was a big tussle over the ring there, and they were saying padding needed to be taken out of the ring on fight night, otherwise they weren't coming out. And, it's all an attempt to kind of unsettle the champion, who's used to getting all these little details his own way. He doesn't have to think about them. It's just taken care of. So, I thought that was, in a way, a good sign. And I thought it was a genuine underlining of the confidence that Billy Joe felt going into this fight, and it really thought that he was going to do it. And obviously, as I say, Tyson was there as a cheerleader-in-chief. He talked a great fight all the way coming in. At the pre-fight weigh-in, he seemed to be trying to do everything he could to unsettle Alvarez. I know that's a very difficult thing to do. The man is an absolute consummate pro, and a lot of other things going in his favour. But, even at the face-off, at the weigh-in of the face-off, Canelo famously has this phrase, no boxing, no life, which he has tattooed on his arm. And Billy turned up with a no God, no life hat on that he'd had made up, so trying to take the theological high ground there and undermine Canelo there. And it did seem to work to a level, Eddie Reneso, Canelo's trainer, said, look, they don't normally say this, Reneso is quite a placid, calm guy, doesn't get involved in these sort of, these trash talking things. But he said, look, Billy Joe, we're going to go for the knockout because he's really, kind of annoyed us. Not they weren't going to go for the knockout anyway, come on. But, it did seem that there was a little bit of spite there going into the fight. So obviously we came into the fight, 73,126 people in the AT&T Arena in Arlington, which was great to see. Obviously hugely partisan. This is the Cinco de Mayo, which if anybody doesn't know is Mexican Independence Day, the Cinco de Mayo weekend. It's, it's become the showcase of boxing for the highest profile fighter in boxing over the last few years. Floyd Mayweather will always fight on Cinco de Mayo, and now having taken over that mantle as the best pound for pound, you've got Canelo doing it, every year as well. So this was the big showcase, as I say, 73,126 fans in attendance, hugely partisan crowd. I only saw one Union Jack flying in that crowd amongst all the Mexican paraphernalia. But, Billy Joe did come in confident. Obviously, Canelo made him wait. He had a huge ring walk, with a big sort of band and lots of, dancers and all that sort of stuff. And again, that's part of the psychology. So Billy Joe was pacing up and down in that ring for a long time. But when the fight started, Billy Joe's tactics began to unfold, and we kind of always knew what the tactics were. As a southpaw, he needs to use his feet, move around. It's almost like he was trying to box in a ring within the ring. Didn't want to get anywhere near the ropes. He wanted to circle that centre off to his right to stay away from Canelo's straight right hand. And, he was doing it quite effectively. It was noticeable, though, that Canelo was kind of stalking him, and trying to pressure him and cut him down and cut the ring off right from early on, and throwing the more powerful shots. Billy Joe's shots were quick, there to sort of establish the distance and then move off. Canelo's shots looked the more hurtful, but, sort of feel them out first round. Then Canelo, it was very competitive. It was very competitive, you've got to say this. And, I thought Canelo, the first round was probably even, maybe Billy Joe got it. Then I thought Canelo got the next 2 rounds, not by much though, very competitive rounds. And then in about the 4th round, Billy Joe started to find his groove. And the tactics that he had outlined here, really started to pay dividends, and he started to kind of ease into it. The hands started to drop a bit. He was kind of taunting Canelo. Again, Canelo just had that menace around him though. When he was stalking forward, he looked, the stronger fighter. He looked like he was trying to put in the more damaging shots. Billy Joe just looked like he was trying to, pop shots and move, pop shots and move. But he really started to find his groove, and he started to relax, and he started to get confidence. And, it was great to see. And I must admit, through rounds 5, 6, 7, you're thinking, is he going to do it? Can he do this? Because it seems to be working. He's winning rounds here, Canelo seemingly, I wouldn't say frustrated, but, he's quite poker-faced. But he just seems to be stalking forward, and Billy Joe seems to be countering and moving well around that centre. So, you did start to get a bit of hope up. But I think the only ominous thing we've always said was, would Billy Joe be able to maintain it in the second half of the fight? He does fade a little bit in the second half of the fight. Canelo doesn't. Canelo comes on strong and maintains and increases that pressure. And, Billy Joe does fade a little bit. And so what were we going to see in the second half of the fight? As we came into the second half of the fight, I think it was slightly ominous when you're looking in the corners. Canelo didn't look tired really at all. He looked absolutely fine. And Billy Joe did seem to be going up through the gears. And this is the key. How many gears has Billy Joe got, and how many has Canelo got? We know he's got a lot. I thought Billy Joe hit 4th gear a bit too early. The mental tiredness, or the mental energy that it takes rather, to maintain that pace of boxing. And those shots that Canelo were throwing were vicious. The uppercut that he kept throwing, missed Billy Joe by millimeters a few times. And it must be going through your head. If I don't stay super switched on and catch one of those, this fight could be over. So there was that, and also the leg movement from Billy Joe. I think it was taking its toll. And so going into the second half of the fight, but it was still very, very, very competitive. And I thought, I had Billy Joe ahead by 2 rounds after 7 rounds. So I know that disagrees with the official scorecards, but they're Canelo's official scorecards. Can we say that? So I had Billy Joe just up. I had him just nicking the fight. And then obviously we came into the 8th round. Very competitive through the first half of the 8th round again, a repeat. Canelo did seem to be putting a bit more pressure on, moving up a little gear. And then exactly halfway through the 8th round, Billy Joe missed with a 2-punch combination, dipped over to his left. Canelo threw a right uppercut, which connected bang on the eye socket. And effectively, if you watch it again, the fight was over. The damage was done. We know now that he'd inflicted quite a multiple fracture on Billy Joe's orbital eye socket. For the next 1.5 minutes of the round, it was exactly on 1 minute 30 that right uppercut landed. Canelo knew what he'd done. He almost stepped back to look at Billy Joe. Billy Joe staggered back. The fight was over. Canelo knew it, and he came in for the kill. He started unleashing loads of shots. In that next 1.5 minutes, Billy Joe threw 1 punch at Canelo. That was a half-hearted southpaw jab, which Canelo immediately countered with a straight right hand. That was the only punch he was to throw for the rest of the fight. Canelo was unloading. He was, playing to the crowd, getting his hands up, beating his chest. He knew, he was basically saying to the crowd, I've got this man at my mercy. The job is done. It's over. And now it's just how I choose to finish it. Billy Joe, like I say, was hanging on, moving around, trying to close him down, managed to get through the round and went back to the corner. I would have thought Mark Tibbs, from watching that round, the last half of that round, knew what had happened and knew what was going to happen, and looked at Billy Joe, asked him a couple of questions, and then waved the fight off. Back in his corner, Canelo said to Eddie Rene, "So I've broken his cheek," and he knew it was over as well. So they weren't surprised. Canelo got up, beat his chest. He'd won, annexed that WBO belt. I think it was, say it was a great call from Mark Tibbs. I think it would have been almost suicidal to send him out again. He couldn't see, and as we've discussed before, if you've lost the vision in one eye, you can't judge distance, so you can't really throw your own shots. You can't see the other opponent's shots, especially as a southpaw. Canelo's left hook would have been invisible to Billy Joe. The fight was all over, and there was nothing but a sustained beating to take. I suppose this, in a way, calls in a little question, and has left Billy Joe open to some criticism. because I think there was no question of what to do. It was absolutely, there was no way he could continue fighting. I'm also, I've been told by medical people as well, this is not like a broken nose or a chipped tooth or a cracked rib. Some things you can fight through. But the pain from orbital eye socket damage would be incredible, because your body is basically saying, if you do not stop this, you will lose this part of yourself. It will be damaged beyond repair. So, the pain would have been incredible. And so I think there's only one thing to do. Obviously, it does call into wider question. Billy Joe was very critical of Dubois when Dubois quit with a similar injury against Joe Joyce, and repeatedly said that he would fight on if he'd lost both eyes, his teeth, or whatever. And but I think maybe Billy Joe made the completely right decision, or Mark Tibbs made completely the right decision. Billy Joe went along with it, and I think maybe now it's time to stop this sort of silly machismo in boxing about I would fight if half my head was hanging off. Let's be a bit sensible, guys. It is a sport at the end of the day, and these guys are incredibly brave. And there's no point inflicting permanent damage when it's absolutely pointless. In other words, what I'm saying is, if Billy Joe was sent out for the next round, he obviously would have been stopped by Canelo, and permanent damage would have probably inflicted. So no question, no argument there. And Billy Joe did chase his dreams, and he just fell short. So fair play to him. But where we go from here, obviously Canelo marches on. Caleb Plant is next, and that will annex all 4 belts in the super middleweight division. It's almost difficult to see where he goes after that. He's cleaning out the divisions, not only the division he's in, but the divisions around him. But as Marcus Aurelius famously said in Gladiator, there is always someone left to fight. So I'm sure it will happen. And even Roy Jones met his Antonio Tarver. So Canelo says he's going to carry on for another 7 years. So as the cheerleader of the sport, I think it's going to be fascinating, and those challenges will come. It's just almost hard at the moment to see where they come from. As for Billy Joe, let's just hope. I mean, I know he went in for surgery on that eye on Sunday. So let's just hope and pray that that's successful and he comes back. But as Kell Brook will tell you, that's a very difficult injury to come back from. So where he goes from here. And also the thing is, he's kind of been to the top now. It's always more difficult to rebuild. He's also made a lot of money, Billy Joe. He's been very clever about the fights. He's made good purses, and that Canelo one would have obviously been the biggest of his career, and he's invested it well. So he's a clever guy. Although nobody seems to think it from some of the videos he releases. So will he have the motivation to carry on? And also, to rebuild, he's got to go down the pecking order again. The fight that stands out immediately is Chris Eubank Jr. Because he's always been calling for a rematch there. But would he feel like that was going over old ground again? So we'll just have to see how that surgery goes, and if Billy Joe's hunger is still there, to come back and fight again. But a successful weekend for boxing. The Canelo Roadshow marches on. Commiserations to Billy Joe, but it was a terrible injury, and I think it just shows again. Even though Billy Joe did very well in those spurts and shows what a masterful boxer he is, the quality and experience of Canelo is almost unassailable at the moment. And the pinpoint accuracy, the additional pressure and gears that he brought, which again can only be got from the experience that he has. And Billy Joe didn't have that, and I think that was was a telling later in the fight that he was going to fade, because he hadn't had that massive fight experience, that top level elite opponent experience. So it was just too big an ask in the end. But I think for a few rounds he did very well and did pose some questions, and almost you thought he's got the blueprint to beat Canelo, but it wasn't to be. Canelo is just a different animal. So they march on, and well done to both of them, and a great weekend's boxing.